Hey everybody, welcome to my new channel. The journey so far, Tales from the Treadmill. I am your crypt keeper. My name is Toby Bittenbender, and if you're new to my channel, this is all about my past addiction issues and then my path to recovery. And so if you're into that kind of thing and you want to hear some crazy stories, click the subscribe button and check it out. I just started this a few days ago, but I plan on keeping it up and making it part of my life. And, if I can help one person, that would be great. That's what this is all about through my experience. And, it's one thing I wanted to touch on real quick is, that everything I talk about is just my opinion because of the life experience that I have. I said something the other day in a video about, if you've never done these things, I was saying you shouldn't judge a person, because you don't really know what they're going through if you haven't done it. But there are medical professionals out there that have studied this and gone to school and do these. And my older sister works at a clinic in Utah where they help people that are struggling with this kind of thing. So it just made me think I really needed to clarify that. This is all my opinion and just from my experience. So anything that I say, just know that I'm saying it from these are my thoughts and what I think, okay? So what we're going to get into today is we're going to talk about the 80s. That's why I'm wearing my Motley Crue shirt, one of my favorite bands from the 80s. I got to actually see them in '89 on the Dr. Feelgood tour. It was awesome. I feel very lucky for that. There's one thing about, getting older and being older is that, I'm jealous of people that got to see Jimi Hendrix and the Doors back in the day. You know what I mean? But yeah, let's talk about the 80s. The 80s, I came into the 80s as an 8-year-old kid. I left as an 18-year-old child. I was, ending at the end of the 80s. I was kind of, at the end of my high school career. I graduated in '91, but the thing is, the beginning of the 80s, I immediately got into Van Halen. I was and still am a huge Van Halen fan. And Eddie Van Halen was my idol. I had his posters all over my wall. And, I wanted to emulate him on the guitar. And so, real quick, a couple of stories. So my first concert was the Van Halen on the 5150 tour. My good buddy James called me up one day. I'll never forget, we were in the 8th grade, and asked me if I wanted to go. His stepdad, Rick, awesome dude, took us to the show. I was 13 at the time. I think James was 12. We both loved Van Halen. We were on the soccer team together. That's how we met each other, and we, bonded on a lot of different things, but music was a huge one. And James was a drummer, and so, we go to the concert, and, Van Halen started, and it was like a religious experience. We were at Tarrant County Convention Center, and we're watching, and Eddie Van Halen goes into his famous guitar solo on that tour. It was the 5150 tour with Sammy Hagar, and he goes into that famous guitar solo that you see on Live Without a Net, and it was a religious experience. It literally, I sat there in awe. I felt like my whole world was just zoning, it was insane. And then, you've got however many people the Tarrant County Convention Center holds, maybe, 20,000, something like that, maybe more, or maybe a little, I don't know. But all I know is the entire crowd, every time Eddie would stop and he'd look at the crowd would just be like, Eddie, Eddie, Eddie. And I was sitting there going, 13-year-old kid going, I want to be Eddie. That's who I want to be. So that was the day. I'll never forget. Very clearly, I decided that I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be in a band, and I wanted to play music. And I'd already been playing guitar for a few years and learning all of Eddie Van Halen stuff and all that kind of good stuff. But another couple of things related to this channel. What I remember about that night is that it was the first time that I ever smelled the skunk, if you know what I'm saying. And very clearly, we were like, what is that smell, And Rick was like, oh, you don't need to worry about that, or whatever he said, being a good dad and all that. And but I also remember Michael Anthony. Van Halen was like the ultimate party band, and everybody knew that, and they kind of portrayed that way in the media and stuff at that time. And this was 1986, right? So at this time, like I said, I was 13 going on 14. And so, Michael Anthony had his Jack Daniels bass, and he would be downing what looked like a bottle of Jack Daniels at the time. Now, I don't know if that's what that was. It might have been apple juice. Who knows? But they were portraying, and it probably was Jack Daniels. I've heard stories. But you know, they were partying, and that's a big thing that happened growing. You know, I was, like I said, between 8 and 18 in the 80s, and so that's a very formidable time in your teen. You know, you're going from a child into your teen years, and you're, you know, I was taking in all of what was happening, especially with rock and roll. It just looked so fun. And you know, all the bands back then, all you heard about was all the parties and the craziness and the stuff that they did. But you know, you never heard about the pitfalls and the downsides of what until years later. You know, I mean, obviously Nikki Sixx has put out several books about his problems and what an amazing story that is for him to have come from where he was, which was, you know, I mean, I tell people usually that I feel like I was pretty close. I never did to the depths of what he did as far as where he got, but I can only imagine having all the money and fame and all this stuff. I mean, it's just, you know, I don't know. I'm just, like I said, I'm glad to be here. But so moving on, yeah, I was influenced by all the media and what was going on. And I thought being in a band, excuse me, meant, you know, it's a big party. And so that's what my mindset was going into a band. And, you know, so by the time I was getting into my later teen years, you know, the very first time that I ever drank alcohol, well, I was 17 actually, and it was at my sister's rehearsal dinner, and it was just, I had, I think, a beer, maybe 2 shots, and my you know, my sister's fiance at the time, him and his buddy were thinking it was funny. They were giving me stuff, and at the end, I think I had a slight buzz, but I didn't drink again until I was 19 years old. Like I said, I was an athlete back then, and I was playing tennis, and it really wasn't allowed, and I kind of went by the rules, and I did all that stuff. So anyway, I get out of high school, and I'm 19 now, and I worked at a place called Sam's Club, and I was actually pulling carts, and had a friend of mine that just said, "Man, you're so hilarious. We got to get drunk together." And I was like, okay. And so that was my first introduction to really, you know, drinking. We went out, and I mean, it was one of those nights where I'll never forget it because of how devastating it was. I was puking off a 3rd floor balcony. And I remember waking up the next day like being like, what the heck, you know? And so I think I drank for the next couple of years. You know, just beers and, you know, and just hanging out with friends and playing in the band that I was in. And it was just kind of a thing. You hung out with your friends and did all that stuff. And it was a fun thing, but I didn't understand the danger that was in play back then. I feel very glad. I think I have guardian angels that were, excuse me, looking over me at the time. And keeping me from, you know, harming myself and harming others. That's all I know how to think about that, because when I look back on it, I'm like, how did I do that and survive that? And who knows? But here we are today. So anyway, that was my introduction to alcohol, and that would only last a couple years until I got into something else, which I'm going to go into tomorrow or the next day that I do this. You know, and I'm going to talk about that too. But the alcohol, that was the beginning of it. So if you think about it, my alcohol situation has been going on for really 30 years, 34 years, 32 years, something like that, where I was introduced to it and I actually tried it, and then actually getting over it. Well, I'd say it would be about 30 years because I quit, you know, almost 3 years ago. So anyway, guys, I'm going to get into that tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. You know, subscribe to my channel, and you know, and comment down below. Tell me what you guys, how your guys' first experience was with everything, and what you guys got into, and everything like that. I'd love to hear it. So, hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.